Alright, so once you're in Photoshop, you've got everything laid out, and I'll show you how we can do the text in just a minute. And I've got each of the people lined up on their respective sides, stacked the way I want them to be stacked. I'm going to open up my layers palette. I'll drag it off so we can see it. You can also see I've got a huge number of layers that I'm working on. Remember to add any type of layer effect. Let's say I wanted to add a drop shadow just to him. First of all, I've got my move tool. If you go up to the top, I've got auto select turned on. So whenever I click on a layer, it'll automatically select that layer and I don't have to hunt and peck for it in my layers option. Two quick ways of doing it. First of all, you've got it selected. You can always go down to the little FX button and then choose the drop shadow from there. Let me show you a quicker way of doing it. If you'll click on a blank area of the layer name, not on the layer name, not on the icon, but in the blank layer, it'll automatically pull up your layer styles, so you don't have to choose a layer style from the bottom. The thing to remember when you do that though, it'll automatically choose, it won't choose any of the official layer styles. You'll have to go through and hit the check mark first to apply it. So I'm going to check off on drop shadow. So you can see I've applied a little bit of a drop shadow. Also click on the name to pull up the options for that one. If you don't click on the name, you're not going to see the drop shadow options. From here, the opacity, the distance, I don't want to have it too distant away from my image. Let's see, you can watch him, you can see it'll start to add the drop shadow there. I'm actually going to keep the drop shadow very close to him. I want it to be just behind him to give just enough contrast around his entire form to let you know it's different from the background. I'll then adjust the size and the spread, so you can see the size is going to get a little bigger and the spread is going to make it a little bit darker. So now he's got a good contrast between that one. I won't even have to touch the opacity. Remember I was saying about the not just use black? So if I double click on it, where's my color picker? There it is. Instead of choosing straight black, I'm going to try to pick up a darker red. It's going to multiply back into it, but it's going to pick up on some of the reds from the background, and it'll make it look a little bit more natural. So rather than just the darker black there, we're using a dark maroon. I'll say okay from that one. So I've got a drop shadow now that's keeping him off the background of this one. I'll say okay. And now you can see that the effect has been added to specifically that layer. What I want to do is to add it quickly to all the other pictures that are on this layer. Here's a great way of doing it. Rather than having to click on another person and then double clicking it and opening it up and resetting all the drop shadow settings, I'm going to hit cancel. If you'll click on the drop shadow or any effect that's in any other layer and hold down your option key, when you option and drag, it'll make a copy of that whatever layer effect, and when I let go of my mouse, it'll copy that effect onto that other layer. So now this layer has that drop shadow that's running around him as well. So I can do the same thing for each one. So click and drag to layer 9. The effect is now added to him. You can see it be affected to layer 10. Now I've got it behind him, and so on and so forth. You can even do it, let's see, whoops, I don't want the layer. Be sure to click just on the name of the effect, not the name of the layer, else you'll be copying that. I can very, very quickly copy this out to every other layer that's on there. Having just this little bit of a drop shadow that's behind him gets away from that flat feeling throughout the entire design. Let's do it for the last one. I missed a layer. There we go. If you don't hold down the option key and you click on a drop shadow and just drag it to another layer, it'll take it away from that layer and just place it on that one. It won't make a copy of it. So that's why the option key is so critical to hold down when you make the copies from there. So now each of my players has a little bit more depth behind them and has some sort of buffer between the edge of this picture and the edge of that picture just by adding that subtle little drop shadow. Same way for once we start adding the pictures, or excuse me, the text from the background as well. Any questions about this before I move on? All right. Another thing to do, to let it be just a little bit easier to navigate around your different layers, I'm going to show you how to group everything together and to keep all of these nice and organized. I've got the Atlanta Falcons on the right-hand side, I've got the Patriots on the left-hand side. What I would like to do, once I've got them positioned, if I needed to rescale all of these, rather than having to click each layer at a time and having to go to Edit and Transform and Scale all of those, I'd like to be able to group them together. Remember when we worked in Illustrator, you can group objects together. You can do the same thing with layers. To do this, I've got my selection tool. I'm going to hold down Shift and watch my layers as I click on each of the people that are in the Patriots. I'm going to click on the logo, hold down Shift, click on each of the players and the coach. So now all of these layers are highlighted. And I'm going to create a group from these different ones. To create a group of them, there's a little icon up at the top left right-hand side of the Layers palette. Click it and choose New Group. It'll ask you to give a name to it, and you can even assign it a color. So I'll just call this Patriots or Pats. I'll even give it a color of yellow, and I'll say OK. Now I've got a folder that they're all inside of. I can click on this. Oh, I'm sorry. I've created the folder, but I didn't create it from those groups. The folder's been created. Let's reselect all of them. I'll do it again. So I've got that. Each of these layers, all selected. I can now click and drag it into this folder, and they're all grouped together, and they're all color coordinated. So I can very quickly select those, and I can even close them up and not have to deal with knowing which layer is in which one. Let's try it again for the Falcons on this side. So I'll get each of the players, each of the people. It's like I've made a copy of layer 10. I'll even get that one for good luck. All of them selected. This time, I didn't realize it. Instead of creating a new group, I'll choose new group from the layers that I have selected. It'll give me the same dialog box. Falcons. This time I'll just make them green. We'll say OK. Now they're all grouped together in one folder that's also color-coded. If you click the down arrow, you can open it up and see what's inside of each of the folders. And this is just a great, easy way of keeping everything organized so you don't have so many different layers that you're working from. You can do this with any type of layer that you've created. Just pay attention of what size and what position that they're in. Also, since I've got my Move tool selected, it'll automatically select the layers for now. Another thing you can choose is the group. So instead of, if I wanted to quickly move around all of the Patriots, since they're grouped together, I can now click on anything in this group and be able to move them all together at the same time because they're grouped together within the same folder. Pretty cool? Kind of handy. It comes in really good once you start creating files that may have like a million different layers to them. Trust me, you'll start creating some documents that'll have at least 100 layers once you start making larger type of photographs. All right, last thing that we're going to work in today is actually adding the text to your document that you're going to work on. What I'll do is I'll turn off the text that I have here. I'll show you how to add this and rescale it, and then we're going to add this chiseled type of embossing effect to each of the different layers that we're working on. Remember, you can turn off the visibility of any layer by clicking the eyeball icon next to it. So now I've got, still got some, there we go, text available. To add text to it, if you didn't figure it out already, you've got a type tool. With the type tool selected, at the very top of your screen in your control panel, these are just the basic controls of changing a font, the size, and the color and alignment. There's also another palette you can open. The Characters palette is located right here in the top center. If you'll click on it, I'll zoom out, it'll automatically open up your Character palette, usually on the right-hand side. I'll click and drag this one off so we can see it. There's also a paragraph if you're typing larger paragraphs of text. We're not going to get into that since we're not doing it today. But this will give you full control over your leading and kerning and even the baseline shifting and doing some different stylization formatting of your text from here. But the Characters palette will give you the full thing. At the very top, we'll give you just the watered down, most commonly used things to control your characters. So let's add text to it, what we're working on. I've got my type tool. Now in InDesign, you learn to create type by clicking and dragging and it'll create a type box that you can type inside of it. Working in Photoshop, it's not common to do that. So what I want you to get into a habit of doing, instead of creating a type box, I'm actually going to delete that one away. Just click once, and you'll get your insertion point. From there, start typing out what you want to say. So we'll say Super Bowl. I'm going to highlight it, and we're going to change the font color of it first. So the color of it, you can find it at the top, or you can find it in your color palette, 2 different places. In our case, we're going to make it that kind of golden yellow type look, so it'll show up on the background. You could change the size of it from your character's palette by adjusting the size of it from here. Let me show you another quick way of doing it as well. If you choose your Move tool, of course you can move around on whichever layer or group that you have. Here's another quick fancy selection you can do. Instead of going to Edit and Transform and Scaling, if you chose Show Transform Controls, this will put a bounding box over whatever layer that you have. So now when you see the type that we've created on that layer, you've got your 4 little dots around the corner and on the edges of it. You can click on those 4 dots and be able to automatically scale and resize any text that you have already open. Wow, my computer's running slow this morning. So I'm going to quickly make it much, much larger. Remember, once you do any type of transformation, you need to accept the changes by clicking the check mark or hitting the Enter key. I'm going to make this even bolder, so let's change up. Yeah, let's choose a bold size. I'll place it right about there. And we need to type in the Roman numerals. Instead of reformatting everything, I'm going to make a copy of this layer. Do y'all remember the quick way of making a copy of something if you got your Move tool selected? There you go. Hold down your Option. When you click and drag, you've got a copy of that one created automatically. And then choose this one. What Super Bowl is this? XLVII. I want this to be a little more spaced out. So I'm go into my control panel. Here's my, my tracking. Set it at 200. 200 will work. I'm going to choose my Move tool again. Since I have the Show Transform controls set up, I'm just going to click and drag it until it takes up the entire bottom portion that I'm working on. Close enough. You can use your arrow keys to nudge things along if you don't have to, if you can't be able to move it. Final thing, let's throw in New Orleans down at the bottom. Of course, it's going to be smaller. N-E-W-O-R. New Orleans. No fall? One day you're going to fall. Let's space that out. Here's another little quick tip. Instead of clicking on, so I'll zoom in so we can see this, I want these letters to be spaced out a lot more, and of course we can do that by adjusting our tracking right here. You can type in a specific number, let's say 100, and that'll space those out. Or if you click on the icon, notice how I've got a little hand with a back and forth arrow. You can click and drag and automatically increase the spacing that way. So it's just kind of a neat little trick to push it out rather than typing in or guessing at a number. You can click on the icon, and that'll work for actually any of these other icons. So if I wanted to quickly adjust the size of it, I can do that for the size of that. I'm going to keep it small down at the bottom from there. So, good little set of text that I'm working with. Let's add that chisel effect to, let's work on Super Bowl first. So I've selected the Super Bowl layer. Remember, you can double click on a blank space on the layer, and it'll bring up your layer styles. And we're going to add a bevel and emboss to it. And that's this one here. Remember to click on the name. Now I've got all of my options. There's a couple of different styles, but the style we're going to use is the inner bevel, and the technique is going to be chisel hard. So it's going to give you that hard edge line going down the center of it rather than a smooth curved edge. I'll back out so we can see it happen as we change up the stuff. We'll then adjust the depth. So as I adjust it, you can see it'll go up to a nice sharp point, and even to the size. So now you can see it has that rock hard edge as if it's chiseled into stone from there. Remember what I was saying about drop shadows also applies to even beveled edges. Rather than using just the straight black for your shadowed edge, if you'll go down to the bottom, change your shadow from black. In my case, I chose an analogous color to here. I chose it to be a darker red. Let's make it even a little more orange. Since it's orange now, it looks a lot more golden. Compare that to the black that you had down there at first. Black is just too synthetic looking. If you want to have that golden effect, have your drop shadow be an orange or a darker red. I think that looks pretty good from there. I'll say okay with that. And I'll also say okay. So now I've got my layer style applied to that particular text. Remember, we can do our fancy trick for applying the style to the other layers as well. So I want this to be on the New Orleans. Hold down Option, click on the name of the effect, drag it there. And so New Orleans has it. Let's try it to the Roman numerals. Click and drag. In one fell swoop, I've applied the same effect to that one as well. Any questions before I move on? Very simple, very, very easy to do. I'm even going to group all of these together. So I've highlighted all three of these layers. Remember, you can go to create a new group from these layers. I'll call it text. And we'll say okay. And now they're grouped together within that particular text document. One last thing. Several people stumbled into how to use smart objects that we learned to create last time. When you add the NFL logo, we're going to add it to the very top center or somewhere in the center of your page. Let's open up, where is today's? Oh, that's my downloads. No wonder I don't have it. If you'll open up the images from the class, one of the images is the NFL logo in an EPS format. Remember, EPS is a vector format, so if you wanted to edit this, you could actually open up Adobe Illustrator and be able to make changes to that particular document. To get it on here, instead of dragging it down to the icon and opening it up, I'm just going to drag it straight onto here. At first, it'll give me a bounding box to ask me to resize it to the size that I want, and since it's vector, it doesn't really matter what size. I'm just going to hit return to lock it in. And if you'll look in your layers, you'll notice it's got that smart object icon right there. So I've automatically added it in as a smart object. And you can place it wherever you want on here. I'm just going to place it at the top for now. Actually, I think it may look good. Yeah, I'll keep it at the top. Now here's the fun thing. Since it's an EPS, let's go ahead and open it up in Adobe Illustrator. I can open it up from here and make corrections to it. And whenever I make these corrections after I save it, they'll be reflected onto the Photoshop document that I have. If it decides to work correctly today. Sometimes I work without a net. We're living dangerously here, folks. Okay, so let's make a change to the NFL logo. I'm sure they'll appreciate me doing this. Let's say they don't want red lettering. Let's make it orange lettering. So I'm just going to quickly select the red area. Choose an orange, choose a yellow. We'll say okay. I'll then go to File and Save. Logo is now saved, so when I load it up, I can go back to my poster. Oh, did it do? Did it do? Uh-oh, didn't work out. Tell you what, let's try this again. Another way you can do it, rather than saving the original file, if you'll click, Option, hit cancel, there we go. Click on it, go back up to your little top drop-down menu, top right-hand corner, and where is it? There it is, edit the contents. Now I can open it up. It's going to give you a little warning box saying, after you do the editing, be sure to save it to commit to the changes. I'll say okay. There we go. It's opening it up in preview. Well, if I had it set to default to open up in InDesign or Illustrator, I'd be able to make the changes to this document. I'll redo this and show this to you next time. But know that if you do want to save something as a smart object and then make edits to it, you can always select whatever layer you're working on, then go to the drop-down menu and choose Edit Contents, and you can edit the contents of that particular object that you created. Does that make sense? All right. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you all time to work on this project. Remember, it's going to be due on Monday, so if you don't finish it up today, you'll have time to work on it next class period. But at, let's see, we'll work for about an hour, so at 9 o'clock, 9:30, we'll stop and we'll do our exercise for today, which is going to be kind of fun. It'll get us out of the class and actually taking pictures of different stuff as well. All right.